During an interplanetary war, a military commander stationed off the planet tried to make peace. However, things didn't go as planned when they discovered that the robots they had built to kill the enemies had gained sentience and had started rebelling against humans, and even their creators. In the year 2078, there was a mining colony on a planet called Sirius 6b. The new economic bloc called the NEB Corporation had discovered beryllium, the solution to the energy crisis, and for 50 years, they had taken control of the mining throughout the known solar systems. But mining beryllium had consequences. It unleashed lethal doses of radiation and pollution. A federation of mine workers and scientists called the Alliance demanded the mining be immediately stopped as it was dangerous, but NEB refused. Instead, they declared an all-out war against the Alliance. The war was confined to Sirius 6b, and the planet was devastated after the series of NEB bombings. Along with the war, the deadly beryllium radiation also killed thousands of civilians. Due to the war, the once beautiful planet is now reduced to nothing but a toxic wasteland. In the 5th year of the war, scientists from the Alliance created and deployed killing machines called Autonomous Mobile Swords, or AMS for short, which are nicknamed Screamers due to the high-pitched noise they make. These machines are artificially intelligent, self-replicating machines that were supposed to kill NEB soldiers on their own. But Screamers had a tendency to kill all kinds of living things they detected, not just NEB soldiers. So the Alliance soldiers wore advanced bracelets called tabs, which rendered them invisible to the machines. Despite this, the Alliance still avoids going out as much as possible to avoid the Screamers. One day, in the Alliance base, mercenaries were seen playing and relaxing inside when they noticed a single NEB soldier approaching their base. The female mercenary, Landowska, aimed the sniper at the NEB soldier to kill him, but when they saw the Screamers approaching the NEB soldier, they decided to just watch the scenes unfold. The scared NEB soldier was firing at the Screamers, but there were too many of them. The NEB soldier raised his hand to show the Alliance what he was holding and screamed as that same hand got cut by a Screamer. The NEB soldier got cut into pieces, and the Alliance mercenaries could only watch in disgust. Landowska informed Lieutenant Commander Chuck about the thing the NEB soldier was holding up, and Chuck decided to go out to retrieve it. He turned on his tabs and killed the Screamer that was pulling the soldier's hand. Chuck held the hand up and took the cylinder-shaped object, seeing that it was something crucial that only the Alliance commander could see. Chuck brought the cylinder object to Joe Hendrickson when something flew out of it. Joe took it and read it using a microscope. The letter stated that the NEB Corporation wanted a peace negotiation, and Joe was suspicious, thinking that it was just a tactic to get them to lower their guards. Joe scanned the letter and ordered Corporal McDonald to transmit the messages to San Francisco when his attention was called by Chuck, who asked him to look at something. Besides the fact that only one NEB soldier was sent to deliver a message to them, the NEB Corporation had been silent for the past 2 weeks, and Chuck shared his suspicions about it. Joe and Chuck went to discuss the peace negotiation with the virtual reality version of Secretary Green, one of his superiors who was based on Earth. Secretary Green explained that they had already been approached by the NEB Corporation based on Earth, and the peace negotiation was already underway on Earth. Secretary Green also explained that there were beryllium reserves that had been found on Triton 4 with no sign of radioactivity. The Alliance HQ was planning on signing a world peace agreement and renewing contracts with NEB to mine on Triton 4. Secretary Green then began flickering due to radiation interference, and when he was fixed again, he was already ending the meeting. Joe and Chuck then went to the small bar in their base, where everyone smoked red cigarettes after receiving a radiation alert. There was a sudden explosion that shook the base, and they went out to see that a Sirius 6b transportation had crashed. They were confused when they saw the transportation, as there was no transportation service on the planet. Joe was even more confused and shocked when he realized that the transport was actually a nuclear reactor. They rescued the only survivor, who almost got killed by a Screamer due to him not having any tab. But Joe was quick to save him as he shot the Screamer and brought it inside to check on it. The survivor entered the room and introduced himself as Private Michael Jefferson, who was bound to Triton 4 and was tasked with invading, attacking, and extinguishing the enemy, which is the NEBs. That's when Joe and Chuck learned that the peace negotiation was false and that Secretary Green had been arrested and executed by the Alliance Command 2 years ago. The next day, Joe and Michael set out to meet with the NEB commander. While traveling through the wasteland, they heard a sound and jumped down to hide, thinking that it was an enemy. But instead, a young boy holding a teddy bear came out, and Joe gave him some food, promising that they'd come back for him. But the young boy wanted to come with them, and Joe couldn't decline. The boy introduced himself as David, and he had been living alone in the ruins, hiding from the Screamers. At night, while Michael and David were sleeping, Joe noticed a Screamer approaching and saw that Michael wasn't wearing his tabs, but the Screamer also attacked him despite him wearing his tabs. And when he checked its card, it wasn't the same card as before, and the Screamer was upgraded. They continued traveling until they reached the NEB headquarters. Unbeknownst to them, an NEB soldier was watching and scanning them. Suddenly, the soldier shot David, revealing that the young boy was actually a Screamer. 2 NEB soldiers, Becker and Ross, approached them and brought them inside the bunker, where they met a black marketeer named Jessica. The trio explained that David was a Type 3 Screamer who could impersonate humans. Joe and Michael learned that another NEB patrol found another David and brought it into their base. Once inside, the David Screamer killed everyone, and only Becker, Ross, and Jessica survived. Joe called the Alliance base to inform them of what he learned, but due to radiation interference, he was unable to do so. Joe wanted to meet the 5th NEB Army commander, Marshal Cooper, and Jessica offered to take her to the command bunker, but in return, she wanted to return to Earth. Joe declined, explaining that they wouldn't be able to leave Sirius 6B because the Alliance and the NEB Corporation had decided to bring the war to Triton 4, abandoning Sirius 6B and everyone who had survived it. The group headed to the command bunker and went up to the ground level, where they saw trails of blood and human body parts all over the place. Joe used the only mainframe computer and discovered that the peace negotiation NEB requested was actually just false. Then they saw a Screamer approaching and hid, watching as the Screamer scanned the mainframe computer and gathered information by itself. When the Screamer noticed them, Michael tried to use the tabs to see if they were still working on the Type 1 Screamer, but they weren't, and the scared Ross killed the Screamer. The lights went off, and they heard the sound of David asking if he could be with them. Joe told the group to go back to the safety bunker while he stayed behind to see what the Type 2 Screamer was. He failed to know what the type was and decided to go back to the others with Michael, who came back to get him. Back in the bunker they were first in, Joe asked what the Type 2 Screamer is. Becker started annoying Ross, who kept telling Becker to jump off his back, words that he kept saying too many times. Becker then explained that the Type 2 Screamer they met was an injured soldier who keeps on saying the same words, "Help me," over and over again, implying that Ross is a Type 2 Screamer, as he is always saying the same thing. Becker killed Ross to prove that he was a machine, but when Joe pulled out the knife, they saw blood, proving that Ross was a human. The only reason Ross kept on telling Becker to jump off his back was because Becker kept on annoying him, and Ross was too scared to think of anything else to say. Jessica was both disappointed and suspicious upon seeing the blood on the blade, and pointed her gun at Becker, stating that Becker was more suspicious than Ross, because unlike Ross, whom she had met long ago, she only ever knew Becker existed after David killed everyone in the base. Becker explained that he only wanted to keep them safe and falsely accused Ross because of it. The group decided to head back to the Alliance base, and before they left, Joe threatened to kill Becker if he made another mistake. They reached the Alliance base, and Joe tried calling but failed again because of the radiation interference. So they walked closer, and Joe could finally hear Chuck's voice clearly, but Chuck kept on saying the same thing over and over, and Joe knew something was wrong. So he changed tactics and got Chunk to open the door, only to be met with a horde of Davids. The group killed some of the Davids, but there were just too many of them. So Joe asked for the micronuclear missile Michael stole from the bunker. He launched the missile and wiped the Davids out. Due to the explosion, the group was hit and thrown away by the impact. They woke up the next day, and Michael went to aid Becker, who was screaming for help. But Michael seemed to have forgotten what Becker said about Type 2 Screamers and didn't notice how Becker, an injured soldier, kept on saying the words, "Help me," over and over again. Joe was the first person to realize that Becker was a Type 2 screamer and yelled for Michael to stay away from Becker, but it was too late, as Becker had used the strength of a machine and crushed Michael's bones with his bare hands before throwing Michael's dead body away. Joe ran to attack Becker but was thrown away too, and when he saw a gun, he crawled towards it and destroyed Becker with an explosive round. He then cradled Michael's body, sighing in sorrow as he realized Michael was already gone. Joe then took the card out of Becker, and when Jessica asked for it, he put the card in Jessica's hand, which he suddenly cut. Jessica cried in pain, and Joe apologized, reasoning that he only wanted to know if she was indeed a human. To make up for it, Joe decided to cut his own hand, but Jessica stopped him. The two of them hugged each other before they pulled away a bit to create enough space for them to kiss. Then they started traveling together to locate an emergency escape shuttle that Joe told Jessica about. They traveled for too long, and Jessica was already growing hopeless. She wanted to give up searching and just stay in Sirius 6B until they died, but Joe hugged her as he promised to take her home. Once they finally found the emergency escape shuttle, they went in and prepared to launch. Jessica was the first to go down to the shuttle, while Joe stayed above to fix the crane that was blocking the trajectory. But then, Joe was attacked by Type 2 Screamer Chuck, who threw him down onto the crane. The crane moved as Joe and Screamer Chuck fought against each other. Joe destroyed Screamer Chuck and went down to the shuttle, but there was only one seat and one life support system. So Joe decided that it would be best for Jessica to leave Sirius 6B. Jessica declined, not wanting to leave Joe alone. Joe pulled out a coin and flipped it, saying that if it showed Rome, he'd leave. But if it landed in Egypt, Jessica would be the one to leave. Joe then flipped the coin but threw his glove over it and pulled Jessica towards the shuttle. They kissed for the last time, ready to say goodbye to each other. But then a second Jessica taunted the couple. Second, Jessica revealed that they are a new type of screamer, a type that is more human-like as they can bleed, feel, talk, laugh, or do anything humans do. It was also revealed that the first Jessica had been a screamer all along. But unlike the second Jessica, the first Jessica is a good machine who doesn't want to kill humans. Joe threw the first Jessica into a soft pile of objects behind him and attempted to get a gun from inside the shuttle. But he was grabbed and thrown by Jessica, who tried to leave with the shuttle. But then the first Jessica stopped her, and two lookalikes fought against each other. Joe took a gun from the shuttle and went to shoot Jessica with it. But it was already too late, as the first Jessica had been killed. When Joe shot the second Jessica, the latter screamed in that high-pitched voice, and Joe fell from the shuttle while covering his eyes. A minute and a half before the shuttle starts, its exhaust lets out flames, melting the second Jessica. Joe then approached the dying Jessica, who admitted that she didn't want to go back with Joe to Earth because she was afraid. Joe praised Jessica for learning how to go against her own kind for good. Jessica then confessed that she also learned something else that Joe taught her, which is to love. The first Jessica dies, and Joe kisses her for the last time before escaping the planet Sirius 6B in a shuttle. In the epilogue scene, it showed Joe throwing his hand gear at the back, hitting the original David's bear. The bear slowly began to move as the shuttle flew back to Earth.